What's up, everybody? It's Pastor Jay back with another episode of the Illuminate Your Life podcast. I don't know where in the world you're watching this. I don't know what time of the year you're watching this, but right now, it is the beginning of December 2023, and we're about to enter into 2024. And I'd love to talk to guests who really are all about spiritual empowerment. And this guest that I have on today, I've known him for a long time. In fact, we went to the same high school together. In fact, he lived right around the corner from me. I believe we used to ride the same school bus to school, which is pretty funny. But in high school, we really didn't have a relationship like that. But as we've gotten older, our paths have crossed many more times, and we've built a brotherhood and a kinship. And I really appreciate this man. I love Pastor Stephen Thurston. Now, Pastor Stephen Thurston is a pastor. He's a community leader. He's a counselor. He's a motivational speaker. But what I really love about Pastor Stephen Thurston is he loves to stir the pot in conversations on social media. And today we're going to talk about living an empowered spiritual life in 2024 and beyond. So I want to welcome to the show Pastor Stephen Thurston. Let's give him a round of applause. Hey. Now, I got to point out, he got the purple drip on. He got the purple. He got the artwork in the background. Probably got that custom in Monaco, knowing him. You know what I'm saying? They love him over there. He loves to travel, and he just loves to show out. So he had to come on the Illuminate Your Life podcast and outdo Pastor Jay, which I don't mind because it's all about the guest here on this show. So Pastor Stephen Thurston, welcome to the Illuminate Your Life podcast. How are you doing, sir?
Man, I'm well, Pastor Jay. Thank you, man. I'm very honored to be here with you. You could have opened up your platform to so many people and you decided to holler at me. I appreciate it. Like you said, we go back. And the fact that I'm number 3 in your lineup, that means a whole lot, man. Thank you so much.
Now, what's funny about that, this is the third guest that I've had, the third taping, and I wanted him to know that the greatest player of all time was the third pick, Michael Jordan. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. You're going to be the GOAT of guests.
Let's shoot for it, man.
Let's shoot for it, man. So tell me, Pastor Thurston, we're just going to dive into it. What are some
Yeah.
of the things that you're encountering right now as you see people all across the world? What are some of the things that you see people right now that they're encountering when it comes to spiritual growth? Some hindrances that is
Mm.
causing for them to not being able to grow and experience the life that they really want to live.
Yeah, man, great question. I think cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias are two major components in this struggle people find themselves in. As we've gained access to more insight, information, and education, people are wrestling with deconstructing their faith, deconstructing bad theology, deconstructing white evangelicalism that has influenced their theology in a great way that many are just coming to the recognition of. And how do I process this? How do I not throw out the baby with the bathwater? How do I admit that my ancestors did the best that they could with all that they had? And I don't want to down them, but some of the stuff that they pushed and taught me just don't line up. It don't work. I've educated myself in the faith space. And so, yeah, that's wrong. That's bad theology. And I want to move on from that. But then that causes friction in my relationships with my family, with the faith community that I've grown up with my pastor who shepherded my soul for all of these years. And he's saying stuff that's just like not right. How do I reconcile that? How do I deal with it? And to underscore all of that, there's emotion that's tied to it. And many people don't know how to name the emotion, Jason, because we've framed it in one dynamic, but that emotion is called grief.
Hmm.
And many people just associate grief with death, but no, grief covers the landscape of things: loss of job, loss of relationship, divorce, a relocation, starting a new chapter, new career, business starting or business ending. Grief is connected with so many things. My dad just retired, and I had to explain to my mom some of what she's dealing with him in terms of how he's been responding. It's grief, but he doesn't know how to name it. And so grief tied in with the cognitive dissonance and the confirmation bias, man, it's created this, man, crazy space for people to be in that they really need help navigating through.
Man, you said so much in that, and a lot of that has to be unpacked. And
Yeah,
I can even
let's
think
do
about
it.
myself when you talk about grief. I did a post today about 2020. Today, I started really reflecting on 2020, on how crazy everything was in the world, right? And for myself personally and my family, we experienced, okay, internet. Are you are you with me? Okay. I want to unpack something that you said because I did a post today about 2020 and how crazy 2020 was. Like, and I really was just like, did we really go through all of what we went through in 2020? And
Yeah.
my family experienced a massive loss in February of 2020. My 7-year-old nephew, who was 7 year old at the time, passed away suddenly. I mean,
Mm.
suddenly, like out the blue.
Yeah.
And then a month later, we were on lockdown. And then the rest of that year, living out here in LA, we were just on lockdown. And then we had the election and then all the insurrection and all this other stuff happened. And I started thinking like about the permanent scars that were left in 2020
Hmm.
and how grief, like literally that whole year for me personally was about getting through grief. And then, I was talking to my brother about grief as well. My brother is a psychiatrist, and I did a show with him, and I was saying how I also had the emotion of grief when it came to moving. I've
Hmm.
moved several times as an adult, and when I left Chicago and moved to Houston, there was a period of grief because I never left home.
Yeah.
Right. So when you start talking about grief, right, and how that can keep a person kind of frozen in time because we're literally still trying to stay in that old experience that is now
That's right.
essentially dead.
Yeah.
How does the person now move on from a grief space
Yes.
into a growth space?
Yeah. So many people don't recognize that grief and some of the things that we grieve will never get over, will never get past. We
Mm,
just live with and live through. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we
yes.
have to walk through that place. And so many people have also allowed other people to put a time limit on their grief period. Grief is unique, it's individual. There's no standard operating procedures with it, there's no manual. And I know we have the 5 stages of grief, but those don't function in a linear fashion. You can be at one end of the spectrum one day and later that afternoon. Not next week, not next month, but that afternoon, shift to another space in there. And so recognizing how grief works, understanding it, unpacking it, and then recognizing that as you move through life, you'll just hit milestones along this grief path. And so, what that looks like is at the beginning of whatever that event is, there's going to be this rush of emotion. But as you move through life, the intensity of what you felt initially won't last, but there will be something that does last, and that's okay. Moving on, moving forward doesn't mean that you forgot about the person or the thing, that it didn't matter, that it didn't have significance. It was a part of your story rather than sometimes we see it as a stain. Two different things. Part of the story, it's an element there. And so work with it, process the grief, live with the grief, unpack the grief, acknowledge the grief, be okay with the process of grieving, know that yours is not going to look like anybody else's, and then shift your focus towards where you got to go and take your time getting
Man, I hope y'all are taking notes. Like this is like this is masterclass teaching right here.
there.
It really is because a lot of times we don't always know how to name the thing. And I know
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about your dad now retiring. How long was he the pastor of the church?
45 years, 45 years in New
45.
Covenant Baptist Church. Yeah,
And now
preaching
you're
for
the
like
pastor.
52. Yeah, so my great grandfather started the church 89 years ago. Grandfather succeeded him. My dad then succeeded him. I then came on board and pastored with my father. Some people kind of miss that part of the story. I pastored there for 9 years. The folk voted me in. It was a whole process. My dad and I had equal power. I wasn't the children's pastor. I was the senior pastor. We shared that role. And so I did that for 9 years. I retired at the end of 2011, relocated back to Georgia, was doing some other stuff because I invested in the fashion space, had retail stores, all of that type of thing. And a mentor of mine from college asked me to come and serve at his church. So I did that for 3 years in an executive pastor type function. Again, took the next 2 years off. I'm an equestrian. So I just rode horses and taught people who didn't know how to ride, and then worked with people with various disabilities. It's called hippotherapy. And so that was ministry for me, helping people with those disabilities through therapy on riding horses.
Mm.
And then got a call to come back to Chicago, served as executive pastor there at Salem for 5 years, helped Pastor Meeks move to retirement, and we decided, hey, we're going to retire together. So January of this year, we both walked out of Salem together. It was my plan, my goal to then move to Morocco, which is a place that I love dearly, and just spend maybe 6 months there, 6 months here in the States. And then my mom called a family meeting, had a conversation with us about my dad's desire to retire, putting a plan in place. And the question was raised as to if I would come back and consider reassuming that role of pastor New Covenant. So first Sunday in August of this year, my dad made his announcement. It is finished, and said effective immediately. I'm chilling, I'm relaxing. And I've asked my son to step back in. And so I've stepped back in. My dad officially comes out on Easter, as that was the first Sunday that he preached his first sermon. And so we
Mm.
wanted to bookend his career in that way. And then from there, I'll run with this thing until I retire for like, what, the fourth time? We I will set that date in motion so I
So,
can get back to Morocco, enjoy my time over there, man.
so man, you how you retired in 2011? You was like 20. Nah, I just
Yeah, I was 33. I followed the model of Jesus, man. He got out at 33. I walked away. And a lot of people are like, man, how do you do that?
yeah,
And so it's not a matter of age, it's a matter of income. When your money is right and you're in a space where you don't need that
yeah,
consistent flow coming in, you can make some moves. So parents taught me well about managing finances and, all that stuff. And I made some risky moves with business, and it kind of caught up with me a
yeah.
couple of times. But, we bounce back. We live to see another day and keep pressing forward.
That's good. How has it been with your dad now, with him stepping away? What
Yeah.
are some things that you've seen that are, without trying to get too much in the business, but what are some things that you've seen now with him that's like, oh man, dad is feeling this weight kind of lifted, but he's still
Yeah.
seeing himself of what he's been for 45 years.
Yeah, yeah. So a couple of things I've noticed. He showed up a few weeks ago. We had a meeting at the church on a Saturday, and he showed up in some ripped up jeans, skinny jeans, paint splatter on them. And I'm like, and I didn't buy him for him. This is something he bought for himself. So for those that don't know him, this is a guy who's been wearing Brioni and Ferragamo and that level of suiting all of his life. So to see him looking like that, it like clicked for me. It's really sunken in. And then on Sundays, he'll come to worship. Sometimes he'll just chill in his office. Sometimes he'll come out and just sit on the front row and just kind of sit back and enjoy. He doesn't have the pressure of paying that mortgage. We owe 8 million left on the building. He don't have that pressure no more. And so he's totally taken his hands off. And then as we celebrated World AIDS Day yesterday at the church, we had a few guests to come in. And one of the guests mentioned that he was a part of a group that sought Black clergy in Chicago to speak truth to power about HIV and AIDS, stop spreading misnomers and doing harm to the community, and be an asset. And how he celebrated the fact that my dad was one of 3 churches that took up that mantle back in the 80s and fought the good fight for HIV and AIDS and access to resources for our community. So to hear that story, and then for us to do what we did yesterday, which was major, to see the connection there of how the lineage is passed on, how fight the power is in the DNA. I could just see the smile on my dad's face like, yep, what I started is being continued. So we constantly seek to honor the work and the heavy lift that he did for 45 years, not just as a pastor in New Covenant, but as one of the godfathers of Chicago and then a former president of the National Baptist Convention of America. So we're going to keep his legacy alive, man, in the work that we do in community and congregation.
That's awesome, man. You said something earlier, getting back to this conversation about this growth, like spiritual growth in 2024, what you've seen
Yeah.
with people. And you made the comment, and I love this. And this is where you begin to stir the pot, and I love pot stirs. Ain't nothing like a
Yeah.
good pot of greens, because if you don't stir that pot of greens, the flavor ain't gonna be right.
That's it, sir.
The flavor gets better as you stir the pot.
Yeah.
Bad theology. Ooh,
Yes.
bad theology has crippled people, because I see people who they will take scripture so literally, like
Yeah.
literal,
Yeah.
to a point to where it crushes them, it handicaps them to a point. I saw someone post recently, well, we are in the last day. The Bible says that we are in the last days. And I thought about it, and I said, I did a quick search. When did John write Revelation? It was 96 AD. And we're taking things that John said in 96 AD
Yeah.
and trying to apply them to 2023. And it goes into the cognitive dissonance that you were talking about. You can't always relate everything moment for moment.
Right.
And without sounding like a heretic, because I'm a pastor, I try to remove all the literal sensations that you get from reading scripture and go, how can we find something that is really, really applicable for today?
Yes. Yes, sir.
When did you start to unpack bad theology? And how does one really begin to go through that process of detoxing from that themselves?
Yeah, it began happening for me at Mercer University when I engaged in the MDiv program at McAfee Theological Seminary. And just my world was opened up to other resources, other trains of thinking, all of that, man. And so I'm a nerd, and I just dug into it and just kept reading, kept studying as I engaged languages, learning Hebrew and Greek, seeing some of the nuances in the scripture and how translations kind of missed it, and changing one word could change the whole trajectory of a particular text. I just kept digging and digging. And I always wanted to be a preacher that left people thinking in the preaching moment. My dad was known as a hooper. And so because we have the same name, I kind of wanted to go in the opposite direction. You drop me an E flat and I can do exactly what he does, maybe even a little sweeter. But I figured, let me just take the intellectual approach. If I can shout people off of thinking different, seeing something new in the text that they've never seen before,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I kept digging, and surrounding myself with other theologians, other scholars that would stretch me and push me and challenge me and taught me that you should be in a posture and position of raising more questions than making more statements.
Wow.
And then as I continued down this road, I got turned on to a brilliant scholar by the name of Peter Enns. If you want to engage this process of really understanding what the Bible is, why it was written, things of that nature, any book that Peter Enns has produced, you want to grab it. He's got an amazing podcast, The Bible for Normal People. And so, we got the Message Bible that kind of breaks the text down in a palatable way.
Yeah.
Peter Enns breaks all the theology down in a very palatable Message Bible type way on his podcast and in his books. And so just continuing to dig, man, and recognizing I could have it wrong. You could have it wrong, but I want to be in a position of learning. And the most illiterate people of the 21st century aren't people that can't read or write, but they're people who can't learn, unlearn, and then relearn. And I want to always be in a posture where I'm learning and relearning what doesn't work anymore.
Ooh, the learning and unlearning space. And being a pastor, right? There's this. I tried to take on this mindset that I am nobody's savior.
Yeah.
And I try to keep sermons, as you say, leaving people with more questions,
Yeah.
or also in just engaging in another way, because lots of times I want people to understand that the answers are already in you.
Yeah, man, for sure.
They're already
But we've
they're
been
all
taught to check our brain at the threshold of the church and never bring the intellect into the sanctuary.
And why is that?
Because religion has been used historically as a point of control. It's been an opiate for people, and we were supposed to just let that spiritual leader just guide us. They'll know it all. But the pew has become more intelligent than the pulpit over the past 15 years. We got Google. People can Google what you saying right while you preaching. Now, preacher, fact checks. You off base. And then we got lazy clergy that don't want to do the work, that don't
Yeah,
want to do the study.
yeah,
And so they're not able and positioned to wrestle with things or to answer questions. And I'll add this in, because of job security reasons, they want to keep the company line going. So personally, they may have wrestled with something and come to a different conclusion, but they got a board, they got deacons, they got trustees to answer to. So they got to keep pushing what's going to make the people shout, knowing, man, that's wrong. That don't make sense. That's bad theology. So we got all of these dynamics that we're wrestling with as we're coming to this place of a new level of spirituality and growth in that faith space.
man, you saying so much right here. You're saying so much, and our churches that I've seen a lot as a church planter,
Yeah.
where it talks about the decline in a lot of different demographics. Now,
Yep.
as a church planter, a new church planter, we planted this year physically. So I can't be a part of that statistical study to see decline, because
Hmm.
we've yet to hit a calendar year.
Yeah.
But what I have seen is that individuals are still hungry and thirsty, and they want
Yep.
to be a part of an engaged community.
Yes.
They want that. And I
Yep.
remember having a conversation with you a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember. And that was one of the things that you impressed upon me. You said, "Hey man, you got to get people engaged in a community."
Yep.
What are some things that you would actually suggest to people as they are looking for a faith community? They're looking for a
Hmm.
church, they're seeking out. What are some of the things that you would actually recommend to people as they are seeking their next place of worship,
Yeah.
a pastor, or what have you? What are the things that you would encourage people to look for?
Great question. It is what they vocalize being matched by what they actualize.
Hmm.
I've positioned New Covenant as a place where we're moving from prophetic messages to prophetic maps. And so my preaching is going to be prophetic. I'm going to speak truth to power. I'm going to lay out all of this stuff to help you to better your life holistically. But then I'm going to come behind that and provide the people with resources. I'm not going to just tell you where to go, but I'm going to grab you by your hand and walk you there. And if we're not able to actually do it, I've got a part. So viable churches that are going to be healthy moving forward have to be spaces and places that allow people to gain access to the resources they actually need to live out what's being preached out from the pulpit. You also want to be in a place that's not afraid of questions, not afraid of pushback, not afraid of you challenging the traditionalism that might exist in that place. Again, as we're becoming a more educated pew, we've got to be open to having that dialogue and that conversation. A third and final space piece that I would recommend is that they look for places that actually build community and build it outside of just that Sunday morning experience. So again, another example of what we're doing is we create affinity groups where people can join in and connect with things that aren't necessarily churchy, but allow you to build relationship and rapport with people that are part of that faith community. So I do a piece called Holy Smokes. I'm part of that podcast. It's based out of a church in Atlanta that I sit on the board of. But now we're creating Holy Smokes Chicago, which is an offshoot of that. And we'll meet once a quarter at a cigar bar to deconstruct bad theology one cigar at a time. where we can bring people that are in our church and even disconnected or don't go to our church. We don't care. Just come, have a cigar if you want. If you don't, cool. As long as you enjoy cigar smoke, you good. And we're going to talk theology, and we're going to break down some of the bad stuff and the wrong teaching that's taking place, and help people to live and grow and be curious about their faith, to hopefully get them to dive in and dig in and continue to build relationship and partnership with people.
Man, you gonna start something. You gonna start something. The cigar. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yes,
And
sir.
now the interesting thing about it is that cigars have always been a symbol, especially in American culture, like with men. It's always been businessmen, people who are prominent.
Yeah.
It's always been more of a executive type look, leaders.
Yes. Yes.
And but when it comes to what we've seen and experienced in the church, I grew up Church of God in Christ. So
Mhm.
no drinking, no smoking, no nothing.
Yeah.
Like it was nothing, 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 nothing. All you got to do is say, thank you, Jesus, and you feel the Holy. Now, I love how I grew up. We
Yes.
got a lot of amazing Bible teaching.
Yes, sir.
However, as I've gotten older, I see that there have been a lot of things that I felt like, oh, we place labels of judgment
Yes, sir.
upon things that we do not understand.
Yep.
What I absolutely love about you is how unapologetic you are, again, to stir the pot.
Yes, sir.
Where does that come from instinctually? Because I have some pot stirring in me. But
Got
when
it,
I see
man.
people who can stir the pot more than me, I go, man, where did it come from? Like,
It's
what
in my
is the
DNA.
origin? Because there's an origin of it. Because
Yeah, there's an origin story.
what's the origin story of you saying I'm gonna be that guy?
So my name is Stephen Thurston II. That's my father, Stephen Thurston Sr. But anybody who's lived long enough who knew my grandfather says that I'm more like my grandfather than I was my father,
Okay.
or than I am my father. And so John is his name, which is my middle name. And so when you look back at what was happening in the 50s and 60s, when you look at the civil rights movement, there were only 3 churches in Chicago that allowed Dr. King to preach from that pulpit.
Mm.
Now, everybody in the aftermath, they write this revisionist history like everybody was cool with Dr. King, and they weren't. The black church, the black conventions weren't cool with Dr. King. They hated him. So one of those 3 churches happened to be New Covenant Baptist Church, because my grandfather gave 0 F's about Mayor Daley, old school Mayor Daley. If you're from Chicago, you know how
Yeah.
old school Mayor Daley, Daddy Daley, ran the city like a mob boss, and people were scared of him. My grandfather cared less about him. And had Dr. King there. Dr. King was a good family friend, to the point where when he and Coretta lived in Chicago, their kids stayed at my grandparents' house. So in case there was a bomb threat or anything, the kids wouldn't be murdered or maimed. And so our families were close like that. And just my grandfather was like, fight the power, didn't give a damn about white people and races. He was with it. And that has just kind of followed through the bloodline, and it's in my dad, but it's not as strong, and it just showed up in me. And I just kind of came out the womb like, fight the power. And then, we've got family relationships with Minister Farrakhan, and I was been around the Nation of Islam. Jesse Jackson brought me in to push as a little kid. I was always around pushing at his house. So I'm seeing all this fight the power, fight for black people, speak your truth. And so just growing up in those spaces and around that environment, it just kind of became me. And I was like, I was told once that the freest black man in America is the black preacher, because he's paid by black people to speak for black people. And that
Wow.
like was ingrained in me. And because I've always been free, because I didn't need white people's money, I just been free to say what other people aren't free to say. And I made a lot of my money outside of the church. So even if it came down to members being like, that's too much, Pastor. Well, y'all, they've never said that. Let me make it clear. We've never had that type of church. They've always been pro pastor. But even if they did want to buck up, I got my own money. Well, how I live ain't off of y'all. So I've always had that freedom to just like speak it, to say it. And because I'm intellectually astute, I'm always going to do my study before I speak, so I can back up whatever it is that I put out there with a level of confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, because I did the work and the study and the research before I put it out there so that I could stand strong on it.
That's interesting. I didn't know any of that background of your family, and so that
Yeah.
shows that strong that strong background of a foundation of what family does. That
Yes, sir.
structure, and even growing up where we grew up, same neighborhood essentially.
Hmm.
What was it like? Because I have my own experience growing up where we did. I feel like because I've had this conversation with a few of my other friends, few of my other black friends who grew up in particular in Homewood. I believe that Homewood birthed and produced some of the most outstanding black minds that I personally know.
Gotcha, man.
But I think there was a thing that we all, like some unwritten things that we all went through, some experiences that we saw at our school. What was that experience like, that duality of living in Homewood, but doing a lot of the stuff that you do in the city?
Yeah.
Did you ever have this thing where it's like, where maybe you didn't feel like quite black enough, or you didn't fit in, or did you ever have that emotion from time to time?
Not really. Mine was maybe a little different. Moving to Homewood from the city and then having that duality of like church, and we still
Yeah.
had a family house in the city, so we were back and forth every day, all day. It it opened my eyes to poverty and opened my eyes to my privilege. And so I remember sometimes my mom would drive straight down Halsted. And if you drive straight down Halsted from where we live
Yeah.
back into the city, you see a bunch of different socioeconomic stuff. And so that drive shifted my lens on things. And of course, I've been around poverty, but for whatever reason, it clicked in there. And then I remember we lived in Homewood, but I was still at the time was at Emmanuel Christian School in the city when we first moved out there. And one day at lunch, we were having a conversation, and I'm like about homes, and I mentioned, yeah, we got our house is 4 stories, and the kids was like, ain't nobody got no 4-story house. And my mom happened to teach at the school, and I'm thinking again like everybody lived like us. I wasn't really aware.
Yeah.
And then my mom was like, yeah, he's not lying. We do. And then she told me on the ride home, like, hey, everybody doesn't live like us. So you got to like be cognizant of that. So I kind of had that. While at HF, I had one experience where this white kid wanted to fight me, and there was a guy, I cannot remember his name, but like he was a super senior, like he was like 20 and still like he hadn't graduated yet.
Yeah.
He was reaching that age where they force you out, but he knew of my dad and knew of the church, and he stepped in and he was like, man, your dad did such and such for my grandma back in the day, helped her out. We ain't gonna let nothing happen to you, like your dad is a boss. And so the kid wanted to fight me. I'm like, dude, you don't want to do that, because dude got word of it. And I remember getting called down to the principal's office. And I was like, had the conversation with the dean. It's like, I'm trying not to fight him because there's going to be some other issues. And she wasn't getting it. She's white. She wasn't
Yeah.
getting it.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you knew who my dad was, you tell him to leave me alone. And so she put him out the office, and I had to break down who my dad was and the political power in the street, all of that stuff. So that was the only kind of thing that I had, but nobody really messed with me.
Yeah.
Um, Most of the people, yeah, I had a great experience in Homewood. So I've heard the stories,
Yeah.
but those weren't my stories outside of that one kind of experience, man.
That's
But it
dope.
just helped me to recognize my privilege. And what that did for me was help me to recognize that privilege isn't a sin. It's
Yeah.
okay to have privilege, but it's what you do with that privilege. And it made me more prone to leverage my platform and my voice and my privilege to help those who are marginalized and minimized.
What do you feel right now? And I know this conversation is taking on, it's just taking on the shape
We're
that it's
just
taking,
flowing.
and I love it.
Yeah.
When it comes to the responsibility, at times the black community, and I can honestly say there are times when it's so challenging being a leader in the black community. Because if you're a
Hmm.
pastor, you're a leader, period.
That's it.
Because you don't always know if what you want to say is going to resonate. How do you speak to the Black leaders, and especially with, because we're not a monolith.
Correct, sir.
How do you speak to those who may have a different viewpoint but still respect their viewpoint? Because at times being Black in America means you gotta everybody gotta think the same way.
Yeah.
But how do we, it, again, with the intellectualism, how do we rise above that and say, you still my brother, even though I do not think like you.
Yes.
I don't think that your views are really what's going to help our community. But however, I see that there are people that you are helping. How do
Sure.
you speak to that as we grow in Black leadership?
Recognizing that different doesn't mean deficient, and helping people to recognize different doesn't mean deficient, number one. Number two, what we don't understand, we often resort to demonizing. And so because it's different, we demonize it rather than taking the time to get to know it. And so going back to the point I made earlier about raising more questions than making more statements. If you've got a different approach, if I see you post something, Jason, that's like, I don't know about that, I'm not going to get on your comment section and go to blasting you or create another post about you.
Ooh,
I'm going to inbox you, text you, DM you, call, hey man, you said something interesting. Say more about it. I want to
yeah.
hear more about your perspective. And so oftentimes when people, if I think they got a sincere heart and they say something crazy on my post, because I'm good for dragging people. I'm famous for that.
Y'all, he's the drag king.
But
You
if
know,
I
so
think
put
you come
king in
with
there.
it.
Drag king. I've seen him do it. But and you got time today though. Like, it's funny because you always got time.
Man, I'll be sitting on the plane, sometimes going to Morocco, or I'm sitting in the airport, I got a layover, and they be catching me at the right moments. I'm like, I'm sitting in the airport, got nothing to do. Boom, boom, boom. I'm hitting you
Man, he
back,
got
sir.
time today.
So yeah, raising the questions, and I'll ask them in the comment section again if I think they got a pure heart, and they
Yeah.
mean no harm. Just say more, unpack that for me. From a psychological lens, there's something called the 5 whys. And if
Mhm.
you ask a person why 5 times, you'll get to the root cause of why they're saying what they say or thinking what they think. And then finally, you're in the music space, so you get
Yeah.
this. We all speak at different frequencies.
Mm, that's good.
And your voice is going to be captured by different people. Some people can hear you, some people can't hear you because
Yeah.
y'all not on the same frequency. And we got to just respect that. You'll speak to a person and be able to preach to a person that I will never be able to reach,
Yeah.
no matter how hard I try, and vice versa. And that's okay. My only challenge is for those that I don't agree with. And if we go to the process of raising questions and it's still like off, I might, just depending on the level of relationship. That's the key thing for me because it's about relationship that
Yeah.
gives space to engage in certain levels of conversation. I may challenge them because I'm about facts over feelings and data over dogma. Just then present them with some information for them to consider. I'm not going to try to change your mind. That's not what I'm here for. But I do want you to think. So here's something for you to think and do the research yourself and see if you come to the same conclusion as to where you currently stand.
That's good. I hope y'all taking notes, man. I mean, we got this. We got Pastor Stephen Thurston here on the Illuminate Your Life podcast. He's dripped in purple. He's got the artwork behind him. Now tell me, what's your love and fixation upon Morocco? I've never been.
You got to come.
I gotta go. So
Yeah.
let's set it up. I want
Yes,
to bring
sir.
the family next year. So
Dope.
what what is this love for Morocco? Do you have any roots there? Is there something that say, hey, I'm part Moroccan, because
Gotcha.
because if you see his hair, he got the good hair, it kind of lays down kind of Moroccan.
And that's crazy because the more I'm there, well, people think that I'm Moroccan and I'm starting to have difficulty, like even going through checkpoints and security. Like, you got an American passport? No, you can't. So, yeah, it's like that.
Mhm.
But I fell in love with the place a couple of years ago during the pandemic. I was invited. One of my friends expatriated, moved there. She got a global travel company and she set something up where you can come and spend a whole month for $2,000, 3 meals a day, flight,
What?
lodging, all of that. one of her friends had a spare palace that she turned into a retreat center out in the Sahara. So
So wait,
they
how
had a
do you
heat
know
wave.
people? Oh, I got a spare palace, not a spare car, not a spare tire. I got a spare
It's a spare.
palace. Come on.
And she actually met this dude on the plane. It's like a Disney movie type story,
Wow.
and kind of shared with him her vision. And once the flight landed, he was like, "Well, thinking about what you said, I got a spare palace out in the Sahara. Let's do business. Let's turn that into your retreat center." Boom, boom, boom. Flew out from there. So fast forward, she's now purchased her own space in the heart of Marrakesh, which is where I spend my time. And so I didn't go for that. I pushed it back a few months later, ended up taking like 7 pastors just to kick it as a reprieve from COVID,
Yeah.
and fell in love with the place. The food is amazing, fresh farm to table. The weather is great. If you like hot weather, especially, it's great. It's a different kind of heat, like a dry heat. The exchange rate, $1 here is $10 there, and they don't have inflation. Let me say that again. $1 here is $10 there, and they don't have inflation.
Jesus.
So premium gas is like $1.15.
Oh,
I took 14 people to dinner, lamb, steak, lobster, liquor, $430 for 14 people at a top tier restaurant. Yeah.
okay, but
So
Morocco's on the list.
yeah, 6 hour flight from New York. There are people. It's in Northern Africa. So you feel at home. And as a Black American, as soon as your feet hit that soil, you literally breathe a different air. The cloud of white supremacy isn't there. They love us, accept us. They're very hospitable people, welcoming people. You make friends quick, and they will roll out the red carpet for us. And they just love us. And it's just a cool vibe, man. They got strong Wi-Fi, but I don't do no work when I'm there. Healthcare system's amazing. Had a friend on this most recent trip, left her medicine here in the States. Pharmacy is down the street from the house. She walks down there, no paperwork needed, gets the medications, three different medications that she was on. She gets 30-day supply of each, pays $6 for all three of those.
So this is
Had
when
a
you're gonna
girl,
retire.
yeah, this is retirement plan, man. And if I ever got in trouble here in the States and needed somewhere to hide, I fall right in there. They think I'm Moroccan. I just got to work on my Arabic and I'll be straight.
Oh my goodness. So you making everybody. So that's your sales pitch for Morocco,
Y'all got to come. Marrakesh is the spot to be.
Marrakesh. And we're gonna wrap this up in a couple of minutes. Can you leave us with 3 things that people can do in 2024 that will help to kind of jumpstart their spiritual journey? 3 things that they can, like action items that they can actually start today. What are 3 things that we can do to really jumpstart in the new year?
Yeah. I really want to drive people towards Peter Enns. I'm not getting paid by him. I have no affiliate link, but he has been a tremendous help in helping me to unpack and so many others unpack. As a matter of fact, Jason, I'm putting his books as a part of our new members curriculum there
Awesome.
at the church because it's that rich, it's that substantive. So engage Peter Enns, all of his books, his podcast, The Bible for Normal People. He's going to help you to start the process of kind of re-envisioning and reimagining your spiritual journey. Second, find a faith space, a faith leader that you connect with. Don't go to a church just to be going. Go to a place where you're growing. And yep, that might mean leaving grandma's church and the church you grew up with. And it's okay to outgrow a faith space. There's nothing wrong. That doesn't make them bad, them horrible. You have just grown to another level. You're off the Pedialyte, and now y'all who are babies, you recognize that you have moved on to another stage. No more formula. You're eating whole meat now. And so be prepared to do that and be okay with that. And then third, embrace grief.
Mm.
Embrace grief, do your work on grief, do the research on grief. And sometimes that means getting help. And it's okay to have a couch and Christ, a therapist and a theologian, and embrace therapy, Black people. No longer needs to be taboo. We don't need to sweep it on the rug. There's some stuff you can't pray away. Some of us need medication. And I go to a therapist not because I'm crazy, but to keep from becoming crazy and to better deal with people who are crazy who won't get therapy.
This man got such a way with words, man. I I can listen to you talk all day, man. You go to therapy to prevent yourself from being crazy as you around people who are man, listen.
Yes, sir.
Man, I want to appreciate you for being a part of this podcast, for being um, gracious and generous with your time. I know that people who are leaders like yourself, you take your time seriously. So I honor you, and I honor your time. Um, and I pray for you, your prosperity. I pray for your congregation, the growth of your church as you continue to do a great work in the city of Chicago, my hometown city.
Yeah.
So we love what you're doing and what you represent.
Thank you, man.
How can people get in touch with you? How can they reach you on social media? All that. Give us your social media.
Yeah, hit me on Facebook, Stephen Thurston. You'll find me there, and I do a piece every Friday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time called Mirror Moments, where I help people to change what's within so that they can change what's around. Quick 15-minute piece. You can go back and catch all the previous episodes. They're saved in the video section on my page. You can go to my website, Stephen with a PH, StephenJThurston.com. My book is there. I've got some other ebooks and other free resources. My lanes are leadership development and relationship. So if you got challenges in any of those two spaces, holler at me there. And then on IG, Stephen J. Thurston. Follow me there. So on IG, on Facebook, my personal website, and then the church, if you want to catch that piece, New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church here in the city of Chicago. Plug into us.
We're going to bring you back again. The next show is going to be about relationships and dating. I can't
Let's
wait
do it.
because, boy,
Yeah.
oh boy, when I see some of the things that you talk about, I just sit back with a bag of popcorn and I go in. So I appreciate you once again. Thank you all for watching and tuning in to another episode of Illuminate Your Life. I'm Pastor Jay. Please join us again for the next episode. Stay tuned. Click that notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything that we're doing. Make sure that you download the Illuminate Your Life app. That's right. You can see our podcast. You can watch sermons. You can stay up to date with everything that's going on in our community with Illuminate Church. So until next time, I'm Pastor Jay signing out. Peace and blessings.